Hello guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we will be riding this bike around town, and I'd like to clarify two or three things. Kuonyesha how delicate or how hard it is to commute na e-bike. So I'm riding a Yamaha R1 2008 model. Na in as much as it's a bike, of course here in Nairobi tunasema that bikes are more easier when it comes to commuting, but remember, it's not all bikes are easier to commute. So for this bike I wouldn't recommend it for a commuter bike, ama niseme short distances. Why? Because of course Nairobi town, it's chaos in terms of traffic. Everywhere you go, most highways utapata traffic. So for this bike, one of the disadvantages of commuting with this bike, especially around town or around cities, is that the bike is bulky. You can see how the side mirrors are protruded, so you can imagine wakati maybe unataka ku lane split, if you're not careful enough, utaona you are trying to maybe scratch someone else vehicle mwenye ako kando, ama even trying to fit into places where kuna a little of space. Of course for bikes, you don't expect for bikes zikae kwa jam, zingoje jam iishe. For bikes we are used to maneuvering around and evading traffic. So for this bike, one of the disadvantages ya kucommute nayo ama going around town with it, it's that the bike, when it's at slow maneuver, the bike tends to hit a lot. My previous bike, the Z900, that bike was, I'd say it's used to hit, yes, but since the naked bike, there was enough airflow, so it was very rare for the bike even for the radiator, not radiator, sorry, but for the fan to come around. Bike yenyewe ilikuwa very convenient at slow maneuvers and what have you. But for this, the bike hits. Actually, for Yamaha R1, this model, I don't know about models za baadaye, but for this one, the fan goes on at around 106 107 degrees Celsius. So you can imagine, ukiwa umekoma kwa jam, this bike tends to hit a lot. Actually, if you have just worn your jeans, you'd feel some bit of heat, yeah, building up on your thighs, and also in your hands, yeah. So one of the disadvantages of this bike when you're commuting a short distance, or whereby there are so many cars or traffic, tends to hit a lot because most of its cooling effect goes around wakati umeenda. So when you are at high speeds, the wind helps you to cool the bike. So in as much as you have the fan to cool the bike around, the bike will heat up to 107. Yeah, then when the fan comes on, ishukishe temperature mpaka kitu around perhaps 105, 104, depending on the temperature, or rather on the weather. Then it goes out, then it goes up again. So you can imagine, if the traffic is not moving, you are in constant heat. So bike inachemka, inawasha fan, inazima fan, inawasha fan, inazima fan. And also mind you that when this fan is on, ile upepo inatoa, because it's trying to cool something which is hot, that is the engine, there's a bit of kama the heat that is dispatched outside, it's a bit warm, so a bit uncomfortable. The other thing about commuting this bike around town, it's that the steering tends to go around on both sides 28 to 26 degrees around there. So you can imagine on tight spots, hii bike si bike yenye unaweza maneuver. Yeah, it is meant to go for high speeds, and maneuvering it tends also to lean about. But remember, ukiwa kwa jam, you don't expect to lean that much because there are vehicles, and also you cannot exercise that full lean angle that the bike can achieve. So ukiwa kwa jam, you'd get yourself trying to get around tight spots. So what you do is that there's a vehicle in front of you and you feel like you want to maybe lane split, but since the steering is not turning around as the normal board does, unajua board unaweza turn steering perhaps maybe to it's a good angle. Yeah, I wouldn't know how many degrees, but it's a good angle whereby hiyo bike unaweza turn anywhere. But for this, utaanza kurudi nyuma kama lori. Yeah, going forth and back until you get that trajectory, then you go around. And also when it comes to fuel, around town it tends to consume more because you are stuck in traffic. Na fuel, when you are continuously stopping and moving, you tend to use more fuel actually. That's one of the things I learned. Or when you brake much, accelerate more, brake much, accelerate more. Yeah, there is that fuel efficiency that you don't get when you do so. And also, to travel now around these places that I've mentioned, is that the bike is very uncomfortable because you'll use most of your time on your clutch and on your front brakes. So one of the things, first, you're dealing with an aggressive sitting position or an aggressive riding position, and on top of that, every time when you're on your clutch or when you're on your brake, mikono yako kuna venye inaumia, or rather there is a strain that you get, yeah? Because you are leaned forward, and also for this brake and clutch you have to use a bit of effort. So you can imagine stopping and moving, stopping and moving. So every time you're on your clutch and brakes, especially the front brakes, you'll get tired, of course, because of that every time grabbing and releasing, grabbing and releasing, and what have you. But so far it's a good bike, but I wouldn't recommend it for commuting. I have done so many times with this, but for commuting, nah. Then you wouldn't get much of this bike fun, or rather hautaienjoy venye inapaswa. So for this bike, you are rarely on the third gear, perhaps I'd say the third gear around town, ama hata ukienda sana pengine second, fourth gear, perhaps you have just pulled, then engage the fourth, then disengage the fourth, go back to the third gear. So huwezi enjoy the maximum speed. And also for these bikes is that it attains high speeds very fast. It's quick to attain high speeds, but remember, around town you don't need that quickness. Yeah, you just need to cruise around. So you might say that yes, you can pull the way you want, but remember, pulling is not the same as stopping. You don't expect the time that you have grabbed those brakes ndio umesimama. Of course there is a stopping distance, yeah, And for this bike, which is an non-ABS, it means that you have now to have an experience on handling the brakes. So in terms of braking, you have now to engage the engine braking. You have to engage also how you rev match, and also how you grab the brakes. If you grab the brakes recklessly, you are at a risk of either skidding. That is when you have umeshika mguu ya nyuma sana brake, or rather ukishika tena mguu ya mbele tena sana, when the tire is not at operating temperature, that is kama tire haija warm vizuri, you have a risk of losing traction. And you know, for these bikes, when you lose the front end, that's the end of you. Umeenda chini vibaya sana. So also that is one of the few challenges that I've mentioned there. And in terms of fun around town, perhaps tule seme the roar that the bikes comes with. But when you want to enjoy this bike, especially at 1000cc, it's better off you go to a road whereby you'll max perhaps, or you'll have a good range of high speeds. Yeah. For example, I've done severally going to Mombasa, and Mombasa, Namanga. Those are open roads whereby you can max the 60 gear comfortably, and you get a very, very good range on your on your speed. Because around town, maybe you do a stretch of maybe 110 or 100. Of course, that will get on the first gear, but you can't maintain that speed for a duration of time, even perhaps maybe 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Kutakuwa maybe kuna gari inaingia, maybe there's someone who is crossing. So you have also to take care of yourself, that huwezi kuwa unavuta tu bike because inavuta. So the discipline that comes with this bike is that huwezi taka tu kuvuta hivyo, because stopping is not the same as going. You need a stopping distance to stop this thing. And the bulkiness that it has also, with the 28 and the 26 degrees turning of the steering, e-bike, when you try to make a sharp maneuver or a sharp turn, high chances that you'll drop the bike, because that turn does not allow you to make sharp turns. So not unless you're experienced, you'll know how to maneuver around. I've given some of my friends a ride, and I've seen how they have tried to make small or rather squeezed maneuver turns, na naona huyu ata drop to bike. So that's one of the difficulties about riding this bike around town, and also mahali kuna magari. Then also, in as much as people say that loud exhaust saves lives, yeah, it does, of course, but depending on how your discipline is on the throttle, yeah, you will say yes, you have a loud exhaust, maybe pedestrians or other motorists will see you, but remember, not everyone is sober as you are. Kila mtu maybe amekaa na shida zake kwa barabara. There are some people maybe perhaps akili haziko pale kwa road, na maybe some wengine pia wanaona we ni biker, so they'll try and squeeze you out of the road. So it also matters, but the discipline on the throttle, because e-bike, even for me, before I get used to it, because this is the first bike that I've ridden or I have owned that is a complete sport bike, I was used to a naked bike. But for a naked bike, it's a good commuter. The way you sit on it, it's an upright position, so you have most of the controls where you are. So you need that kind of closeness whereby you are just very, very easy to grab the brakes, and also how to maneuver the steering, because the bike that I had previously, the steering used to turn a bit wider compared to this bike. So these are my honest opinions. I don't know about anyone else, maybe perhaps that has ridden this bike or any other sport bike, but one of the challenges that I face, the heating. The bike heats a lot, whereby it's very uncomfortable. You can imagine you're on your balaclava, you're on your jacket, you're on your gloves, helmet, and then the heat that emits from these engines. Then also how slow turns maneuver. are very, very hard to go around. And also you don't have that much fun around Nairobi or around whereby there are so many people. So guys, continue subscribing to my YouTube channel. It's a road to 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for all that you have done, and those who have supported me, comments, shares, subscriptions, I appreciate. So I'll be uploading more and more. So for this bike, for this ride, sorry, this is it. This is my honest review about the Yamaha R1. It's around 8 months of ownership. So it's one of the things that I'll say I'll never regret taking this bike. When you get on that power band, it's very, very hard for you to go down, or rather ushuke bike yenye iko chini, because there's the fan, of which the fan must come with a lot and a lot of this. I have crashed with my bike. I had my first bike, the FZ6. I crashed with it, I think, around 2 to 3 years ago. It was a very bad crash, but with time, of course, you have to, the discipline that you need on these bikes are top notch. You have to, because any bike yenye the sound alone gets attention. So you can imagine that you want watu wakuone, then of course unajua mali watu wengi wako ni mali kuna distraction, maybe perhaps bodas guy, maybe perhaps magari, pengine pia pedestrian. So getting yourself perfectly perfectly disciplined, you don't do that hizo madoido kwa barabara. It's one of the best thing that you can do when owning this bike. So anyone who is willing to go ahead and buy this bike, yes, you can go ahead, but not for commuting. I decided to make this commentary because I had a guy who asked me that he wanted to take this bike or to buy this bike, or rather a similar bike, but for him I want someone commuting. So preferences are different, but for me, fuel wise, it's very expensive, even not reliable. The heat on the bike, and how slow maneuver or slow turn maneuver are very hectic. So guys, enjoy the video. I'll upload some videos soon. So cheers, and continue to subscribe, like, and share. My track is so fun.
see I'm coming from.